I'm not a supermodel. I didn't win the Super Bowl. But when Dave talked to me about this, I thought there might be some pieces of my story that'd be helpful. I went to school here. I did my undergraduate here. My entire career was kicked off by a professor I had junior year and really led me on the path that brought me here tonight. So what I thought would be helpful in my 40 minutes, and Dave gave me some guidance, is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some things that I think about my young life before I came to college that are probably an important part of my makeup that has led to all the decisions in my career that I'll tell you about in the back half. And matter of fact, I'm going to sit down unless anyone needs me up here because it feels more casual, more comfortable. I'm also incredibly tired because, as Dave said, we're in the middle of launching an app, and we weren't ready to launch it, but there was a drummer in a band that was going on tour like 2 weeks ago who posted on his Instagram our app, and we've been getting a couple thousand signups. So we've been scrambling the past 2 weeks just to sort of like make sure the app doesn't crash. I hope it doesn't crash tonight. So I'll begin. Salient facts from my childhood. Dad is an immigrant. Came over here, the immigrant story, Indian, did his undergraduate in electrical engineering in India, heard about the land of opportunity. His mom pawned the wedding jewelry to buy him a boat ticket from Hong Kong to San Francisco, came over. My father definitely has the mentality of someone who came over here when he was in graduate school, sent home the money to build like his parents' first home that they could live in. So that was definitely like present in my childhood, the notion of the scarcity, the notion of like, you need to go out in the world, you need to do something because the world's not going to take care of you. And sold encyclopedias door to door while he was an engineering student, and then got a job at IBM, ended up doing very well at IBM, stayed there his entire career, 57 patents to his name, and met my mom at IBM. Now, mom's story is different than my father's. She's from Brooklyn. She was raised very poor, but as an American and like aware of how like our society worked, whereas for my dad, America represented a land where you could actually like achieve. And my mom knew that growing up. Like my dad, a lot of why he left India was he basically was doing what Kishan and Lauren are doing. He was TAing and was a good TA when he was finishing his degree, and they gave him a class and they put him on salary at this engineering college in Punjab. So after the first 2 semesters, his students had the best grades in the college and he got the best reviews from them. And his dean said, but we're not giving you a raise, we're not doing any of that. And my dad was like, come on, like I delivered, like these guys are doing really well. And they said, well, that's not how it works here. Like these 2 other guys have been here longer. So they get the raise, they get the thing. My dad said, that's terrible. Like I worked harder, my results speak to this. They said, this is not a meritocracy. If you want a meritocracy, go to America. And my dad's like, then I will. And literally was serious enough about it, like his mother sold the wedding jewelry so he could get a ticket and they could go off to this land of opportunity and try this. So my mom, growing up when she did, had a similar notion of like, her family died in a fire when she was very little, and she was like, there is no safety net. Like, I need to go out and like do something because there's nothing to fall back on. And I think sometimes in my life, that idea of like burning the boats, on the shore behind you, sort of mythological illusion, that thing that propels you forward is key, and it was part of my growing up. Another thing that I think is kind of salient or germane about my experience growing up is I'm the older of 2. I have a younger brother, and distinctly had the experience of both trying to take care of someone younger than I and having no one ahead of me that was forging like the new ground. Like my brother went to largely the same schools that I did, way smarter than I, broke all the records that I'd set because he was just better at it. But I was the first one to do all these things, so I had the sense of like, there weren't footsteps to follow, and you just went and did stuff and then let people follow behind you. So that was my early childhood. How I ended up here at USC from growing up in a small town in Northern Virginia was I had done a TV show in the DC Baltimore market. It was a news show that I got selected to be like a newscaster interviewer. And the Annenberg School, the journalism school here was like, hey, if you want to come to college, like, we have a really strong J school, and we'll accept you now if you want to come out and do this. So I came out, obviously came to USC. Everyone was incredibly nice. The dean, because I was interested in business also, so met the dean of the business school, the journalism school, was Denton Holland at the time, and decided to come here and pursue journalism. So my path was very much like, okay, I was a newscaster interviewer on this like youth TV show. We were the top rated youth show in the DC Baltimore market, so it was really fun because you could go out and like people recognized you, even though you're only like 14, 15 years old. It's like you go to restaurants, people are like, oh, you're the one from that show that my kids watch, blah, blah, right? So come out here and was very much in the on-air sequence. So junior year, I had someone that was very inspirational to me, like, you know, imagine David's to you, and I taught this class J300, right? Over here. In the class, even if you wanted to be in front of the camera, you couldn't be. The whole class was, you learned every job behind the camera. You learned how to TD, to AD, to direct, to be a cameraman, to do lighting. And I got to direct the class productions, loved it. Like we did 4 productions during the course of the semester, and that was our entire grade. There was no exam, no attendance, no nothing. It was literally like you did these 4 things. The final one was a half-hour live news show. And I went back after the class to my Dave Belasco and said, okay, I don't want to be in front of the camera anymore. I realize there's way more interesting choices being behind the camera, like setting the agenda and putting things in place, than there is like standing there and saying words to someone. I don't want to go 5th year. I'm not going to change majors and da 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 da. So what should I do now so when I get out, I've laid some groundwork for something else? And Mike Levine, who taught the class, was great. He said, you know what, I have a buddy, actually he was the VP of on-air at ABC. He just left. He quit to start his own company. He was also an entrepreneur. And he probably needs PAs. I didn't know what a PA was at the time, but I was like, if you think I can be a PA, what should I do? So he gave me a phone number. I called this guy, got a job as a PA. I literally took the job not knowing what I would make. I just got a phone call from this woman who had said, I got your number from Greg Cassidy, are you available to work? I was like, yes. She's like, can you work tomorrow at 5:30 a.m.? I was like, absolutely. Went down there, worked for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, it was a shoot that was over on Melrose, and I was a production assistant, which you all know what it was. I didn't know what it was. It was just like the you and like, hey, you, go get film, go buy this, go to my coffee. So I did this. At the end of the 3rd day, the 2 guys, it turns out, who were starting this company, one was the guy from ABC, another guy that hadn't declared he was leaving, but sort of like showed up, was a VP over at NBC. They were going to team up. And they approached me and said, you know what, you worked really hard, you didn't steal anything as far as we can tell, and we're going to need some warm bodies, so like, what's your story? And I said, well, you know, I'm a junior at SC, and I think this is really exciting. I'm trying to figure out, like, what are the jobs? Like, what's out there other than being on camera? Because I'm kind of in that sequence where I'm going to get, you know, a degree in business administration, which is, I thought, a good way to structure my thinking about business. Learn econ, learn how to like take care of business, and journalism, which for me was a good way to structure like storytelling. Be able to like listen to someone, figure out what are the important points of the thing you're being told, and then regurgitate those in such a way that someone else might go, oh, thank you, I understood it, and it was interesting, right? So I sort of explained this to these 2 guys, and they go, okay, yeah, tell you what, how much do you want? I'm like, I'll work, doesn't matter, like just whatever. They're like, here's the deal, we'll give you $50 cash. Every day you want to come in, just see one of us at the end of the day, we'll give you $50. No tax forms, no nothing. Just see one of us, we'll give you some cash, kid. I was like, okay. And I was like, so how do I know I'm supposed to come in? They're like, call our assistant or talk to the assistant each night. She'll tell you when to come the next day. If you work an hour, it's $50. If you work 16 hours, it's $50. Don't bother us. So I was like, best deal ever. So I was totally in. So I did this. And the guy that Mike, you know, my professor in J300 had introduced me to, basically became like a big brother to me. And he was fascinating to me because he had this skill that he traded on. He could look at anything and tell you immediately what was marketable about it, to whom it was marketable, and what were the words that you used to convey that value to someone. So what he was doing the moment I met him was technically working for studios, creating trailers, working for networks, doing promos, like selling entertainment, right? But the weird thing is, during the course of working with him, we got approached to do like destination resorts because he had a way of telling you like, oh, you're going to start a new resort in the Caribbean. Let me tell you what the missing niche is. Let me tell you what that is about. Oh, you have a new band. We did music videos for bands because people heard about him, and we were an incoming call business from people who said, can I show you my magazine, my hotel, my band, my whatever, can you just help me understand like how to market this? So he realized this, left ABC to start a company to say, like, I don't need to be here at ABC doing like promos for ABC Nightly News or whatever. Like, I just do this for anyone who wants. And it became a very successful thing. Happily, you know, as I'm sure you guys do, I worked really hard. He recognized that, became like a mentor to me. And he's the biggest mentor I've had in my entire life. He also taught me how to run a business, because there was a point in time where he said, you were like mini-me. And he's like, let me tell you what I wish someone had done for me. And he literally moved me over the course of 2 years through every department of the company. And I mean, I was like a bookkeeper for a while, because he's like, if you're going to run a company, you should understand what it's like to literally process accounts payables and see how terrible that is. You know, he's like, you should deal with receivables and see how you're going to get that money in the door. Do it for 6 months. Just shut up, do it, you know? And I did it, and it's true, you do learn stuff when you've done that job, especially when later on you're talking to your CFO and you know like what the person 2 levels down from him is actually dealing with. You know that customer, you know that vendor, whatever, and you're like, is this a moment where I can help? Because I know what that person's probably going through. So I got to be a writer-director, and he exposed me to a lot of films, because we had a couple big film clients. Warner's was among them, Orion, MGM, Buena Vista. And this was, for me, a creative turning point in my life. If there was one big like left turn, like career-wise, you can pick that up. Don't worry. No one's looking. Everyone's looking. When I went from journalism into this advertising sort of entertainment promotion thing, the creative turn for me was part of my job when he's like, you need to know how to write a trailer. You need to know how to like make a music video. You need to know how to direct. And he let me direct like commercials. I had to watch a ton of movies. And something I loved was like, in journalism, you have to be so true to the facts. You have to make sure that quote is checked, those facts are, corroborated. Did you tell things did you break the timeline of the facts to tell a story that's maybe a little shady? The right facts in the wrong order are also a lie. And suddenly with film, it was like, I realized you could make up whatever you wanted. It was great in this regard. And it had all the storytelling that I liked. So that led me to think, okay, maybe the storytelling itch that I have can be scratched over here in film. I don't need to be in journalism. So I started hanging out with more and more film people. Now, as this happened, this is leading up to one of the first big, horrible mistakes I made, which is, I'm sure you guys are way too smart to make this mistake, but I did. At a certain point, Greg, my mentor, was like, peace out, made a ton of money, I'm moving to Paris, da-da-da. You should take over the business. You know what? Warner Brothers loves you. Set up your own company. Go for it. God bless. You need my help. Like, I'd be happy if you want to send me a cut of a trailer. You're like trying to crack. It's not worried. I'll totally be there for you, right? But like, I'm going to move. I'm on. Wow, okay. Talked to Warner Brothers, set up my company, started doing this, right? The Warner Brothers account, and this is going to sound like small peanuts to you, but like at the time, it was like $1.5 million a year that we made off that, which was enough for me because I was like 20, I was like 21 or 22 at the time. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Like these guys now calling me, not calling Greg. I'm like now the face of their trailer company and their music videos and the commercials. And the vice president of marketing there got fired, which I didn't know what that meant. What that means is when they bring in someone new, they clean house. So whoever comes in brings all their own vendors. So suddenly, boom, Warner Brothers evaporated. They had another guy who wanted to work with different vendors, and I had not diversified our portfolio because I was like, this is a great gig. Like, we're just printing money here, and hadn't developed all those other clients over like the 6-8 months I'm doing it. So that ended really poorly for me, where I ended up getting everyone that was working for me jobs at basically a sister company that had more work. And I was like, okay, I think this is not working for me. Like this is not making me happy, and I made a bad decision here. But at the time, remember, I've met a lot of film people. And some friends who were in film have been talking to me about this other idea, which is what I ended up pursuing. They said, it's in your blood, your dad's Indian, you have like, this whole computer thing going on, blah, blah. Like, you also know producing, films. We're going to, get into digital effects, like computer generated effects for films. If that's interesting, I can introduce you around. And it was interesting to me because I was like, okay, cool. That seems like a logical step for me. Like, I'm not going to suddenly go from doing trailers and commercials to being like a feature film producer. But I could definitely move into film and do this. Okay. So I went over, interviewed basically with the guys that were starting this small company, and became like employee 5 at this tiny visual effects company that was going to do, CG effects and digital effects for movies. And did the exact same thing I did at the first, go round, which was I got in at a really low level, made no money for the first 6 months, but talked to everyone. I was the night camera operator. And I'll tell you what was crazy about this was my friend who had said, come in and do this, explained to me the value of this. And I actually understood one of the few things I've seen coming that didn't, I didn't have to learn in hindsight. She said, if you come in at night, all the artists that are here that make all these effects, that's when they're alone and they're comfortable. And you can actually go sit with them and learn how this is all done. Because during the day, it's all administration, directors coming in, meetings, and memos, and all that kind of crazy stuff. But at night, it's quiet. And she was right. I could literally go, and I learned how a movie was made digitally by going to sit with a compositor, understand what that was. And they were very happy to tell you, because most of the time, they're sitting alone in the dark. These artists, with no one really to appreciate the work, because by the time they're done, it's being shown at 9 a.m. dailies. They've been up all night, they're sleeping, and then later in the afternoon, they'll come in and they'll get notes. It's a very dispassionate, sort of inhuman, removed experience. So I got to learn, how is a character animated? Why is this animate? Why was this kind of like stretch and squish animation cooler than this kind of animation? Why does CG look weird? What's this uncanny valley? Why are eyes lit this way? How do you do this? It was fascinating. I worked really hard. So a year and a half later, I was running that company. And it was a great opportunity because we had grown and we'd done a couple movies. As lightning strikes sometimes. We just don't know how things are going to work. We happened to do the effects for Braveheart, which was critically for us like a really good thing. Maybe it didn't make a ton of money, but it was the kind of movie that other directors were like, those are beautiful. I didn't even know what you did in that movie, but that movie is beautifully done. Like the movie won the Academy Award for cinematography, which a lot of that was put together in the computer, and the fact that it wasn't like dinged by the Academy for being a computer-generated movie was kind of a badge of honor, where other directors that were, esteemed directors, not like Michael Bay, that just make like, that make like big CG movies, but directors that made really quality movies came to us. So I got offered to go onto this sci-fi movie. Fox had this sort of B sci-fi movie, and they asked me if I wanted to leave this company because there was kind of nowhere for me to go at that point, and come on to production and actually become the client, work for the studio on the movie, and then vendor out all the work. And I did this in an interesting way in which studios work. When we started this movie, it was the kind of experience that you will have where there is no money and no one cares. Like, you need a pencil, it's like, fill out this form in triplicate, and you send it off somewhere, and like you never hear back, and you call up and they're like, we're gonna need that form in triplicate. I filled it out, fill it out again. You do this thing. And then we did a trailer for the movie, and all it was we took some shots of like Washington, D.C. and monuments, we put shadows over them. At the end, the White House blew up, and it was Independence Day, and audiences went nuts that weekend. They just loved the trailer. And that Monday after the trailer played, Fox called us, which is kind of bizarre because we're always one bugging them for money. Fox called us like, what do you need? We're like, how about the pencils? We're still waiting for those pencils, And they're like, no, what else do you need? And they just started naming equipment that was like $1 million boxes. And it was clear, all they cared now was like, finish on time. We don't want any excuses. If you need another $1 million, you need this, we have a hit if we don't screw it up. So their whole attention swung around. We went from being like this little B movie by the guys who did Stargate to, hey, this cool sci-fi movie is getting buzz. And watching this experience from the outside was very interesting for me because I later became the executive in charge of movies like that. I became the studio in my next career turn. So is this like what you guys want to hear about? Is this too much or too little? How many people want like more of this or less of this? Like more? Less? Oh, okay. Okay, good. So I did this, ended up becoming good friends with Roland and Dean, who are the director, writer, producer of the movie. And this is my second company I started now, right? First company, failure. Big mistake on my part. Second company, went in little eyes more wide open. And towards the end of Independence Day, Roland and Dean approached me, and we would spend we were just going like 24 hours a day. So we'd spend the time while we're waiting for the audio guys to do new mixes, just walking around the audio stage at Fox, like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, just to stay awake and talk. So they pitched me this idea. They said, you know what? On Stargate, we had a really terrible experience with the visual effects. We always felt like we just settled, like the deadline came, we just cut the movie with whatever we got at that point, and it never actually looked the way we wanted it to. But here, it actually looks better than what we planned for. We like the people we work with. Why don't the three of us start a company together? And I was like, that's a horrible idea, because just FYI, like visual effects, yes, we may have spent like $15, $20 million in visual effects on this one movie, so in your minds it's like this big thing. But like the profit margin on it is like razor thin, because everyone wants the latest effect. You can't really make money off last year's effect where there's more of a margin. Every good becomes old very quickly, and you just have to come up with a new product. So if it's morphing this year, if it's bullet time, by next year it's boring. So I was like, it's a bad idea. And they said, well, we're actually not interested in the margin. We're making tens of $millions off our movies. We're more interested in keeping together a group of people we think are really talented, because we believe in these people. We don't even know what we're going to do next. We're thinking maybe Godzilla, maybe Independence Day sequel, maybe this other sort of like King Lear in space kind of movie. And I know it sounds like a great pitch someday. So they just said, we'd love for you to be president. And we went through the crew list for the movie and literally picked 85 people that we thought were like smart, talented, and just fun to work with. Like these are people who would be excited, even when you're working 16 hours a day, to see every day. So I went out of them. I got 82 out of the 85 that wanted to do this, wanted to stay together, and we built a company off that. Going into this one, we had more of a clear way to diversify, because I'd met a bunch of directors along the way. So we had other films coming in addition to the films that Roland Dean were doing. After a while, I didn't want to wake up and be like 30, 40 years old. I was 26 or so, I guess, 25, 26. And just be making visual effects. So I was like, okay, tell you what, let's choose the movie you're going to do next. I will be here for that. And after that, I want to step aside as president, and I want to move more towards making movies. I think that's what's really key for me. Wrapping up? Okay, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, so anyway, ended up selling that company. A German conglomerate came to us, wanted to buy it, exited that company, spent a couple years traveling, just seeing friends around the world, figuring out what I want to do. Wanted to get into development with feature films, because what I'd realized creatively, the turn that I took was that thing of, I love telling stories. I love the fact that stories are the fundamental unit of, I feel an emotion. I'm going to take these series of events, tell them to you, so that you can feel that emotion in your chest. And whether it's a beautifully told real story, whether it's any sort of filmic entertainment or TV show, whatever, but that's really powerful for me. And I think that all goes back to when I was really little. I remember my parents going to movies. And I remember, when you're tiny and the adults are always talking about stuff, they would argue about a lot of things, about politics or religion or how you treat your wife or what your brother did and that stupid thing. And I remember going to movies, it seemed to me to be about the exact same thing they were all arguing about, but they'd walk out of the movies and they're like, that was great, I love that. I thought, wow, it's kind of magical the way they see the story there and it explains them how to live life, whereas when they talk about themselves, they just want to argue about the details of it. And so I moved into basically telling stories in film. And Dave gave you a taste of some of the movies I worked on. I was very lucky to work on those, whether it's some of those movies in a small capacity, some in a much larger capacity. But to be around great storytellers was really fun for me. I got approached 2 years ago. I was on the board of this internet company that was a really popular photo blog. They'd done a ton of marketing, including the social media marketing for Star Trek. And the founder of it approached me and said, you should leave Fox, where I was working on Die Hard on this. He said, you should leave Fox. We should start a company together. And I was like, why? I'm not really sure. It's kind of out of the blue. And he said, I think there's a better way to tell stories and what's happening. And he said, do you use Facebook anymore? I was like, no, I don't. It's kind of creepy and weird. The friends I care about are not really on there anymore. And he's like, yeah, newsflash, most of our friends are not on there. A lot of people are migrating away, which is now 2014 really obvious. End of 2011, it wasn't so obvious. I thought I was kind of alone in that. And he said, do you remember when it was really fun? When it was our real friends telling each other stories we cared about. Posting some photos. This is what I did last night. So I'm doing it today. Hey, what are you doing? Like that. He's like, I think there's an opportunity with the way mobile's going, with photos. Instagram's really great. There's a way to somehow bring this together. Take the best parts of what Facebook used to be, what Instagram does right now, and a little bit the real-time nature of Twitter, and put that into one really simple product. What do you think? And we talked for like 6 weeks because it was a big decision for me to leave, that career at Fox. Ultimately, as you can tell, I'm sitting here because it was compelling enough for me to say, 10 years from now, when I look back, I'll probably be more proud if I could create something like that than finishing Die Hard 5 and 6, which are products. They are soap on an assembly line. They get sent out and they fit a certain, they have a market fit. Let's just say that, but they're not something I think that my children or my friends will be like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you for that. So that's what leads me here today. I'll tell you the process. How am I doing time-wise? We're done? 8 minutes, okay. Okay. I can tell you done.
I talk really fast. Sorry? I talk really fast.
Okay. So, these 8 minutes, I'm going to talk solely about the process of starting this tech startup. And I'll try and give you some of the stupid mistakes that I still made because they're probably more informative than the things we did right. I'll tell you what our goals are, which are only partially fulfilled at this point, but as things evolve, we'll see how they go. So if our goal with Pinata was to say, storytelling is a really fundamental part of the human existence, there are some really cool products that tell stories in a certain way, but we felt that there was a missing thing, which is collaboration in telling stories and the ability to really put your life into these little story buckets. So the first 6 months, coming from film, I love a good focus group. We just did focus groups. And literally, like, friends are here at SC or, younger brothers and sisters and friends of mine at UCLA. Friend runs, Lauren, her mom runs a college prep course down in Newport Beach. She put together focus groups for us of, like, high school seniors. Friends were, like, assistants in, like, early 20-somethings, and just did focus groups. Like, couldn't put pen to paper until we talked to enough people to go, like, is there a problem? Like, is it just us? Is there a problem? Is there a need? And if so, like, how do people's brains work? And a couple of things that fell into place for us were, as I started talking about this, it started, the things that worked started to attract people, and the things that didn't. And by attract people, I ended up with, on our board, Dr. Stephen Kosslyn, who's the chair at Stanford of their Behavioral Sciences Center. He was the chair of Harvard Psych Department. His entire work, his life, has been on visual information processing, and approached him at a certain point. And all the guys at Stanford and StartX bug him to be on their board because they want his advice on how to make things like visually work. And he finally locked on what we were doing because a lot of what I learned in the focus groups, just about anecdotal evidence of how people's brains work. He's like, that's actually true. You should go over here and read these things. And after a couple of meetings with him where he kept giving me like reading lists, like, go read this article, go read this, you're onto something. He said, if you want, I'd be happy to be your advisor. Matthew Welty, who is employee 107 at Facebook, he left Facebook. Someone I knew up there as a wealth manager knew him and was like, he actually believes the same things you do. He left Facebook because he became disillusioned with what it's become. But the things you're talking about are exactly what he believes. He happened to be the guy who architected the entire server architecture for Facebook. Like, when he started Facebook, it had 101,000 users. When he left, it had 99 million. And as any of those of you who have tech experience know, like, that evolution of a back end is massive because it's like changing your car from like a Hyundai to an 18-wheeler while you're on the freeway. And he was great. And I met him, pitched him what we were doing. He believed the philosophy. Like, the things that we had learned, that we'd heard validated from other people, really brought people together. Zhao Yang, who created Farmville, he was someone who, oddly enough, a friend was like, you should really know him. He believes some of the things you believe, and he has a great wealth of, like, his Rolodex of engineers is great. So if you need people, he can literally cherry pick, like, you want this guy, you don't want that guy, you want this guy, you don't want that guy in Silicon Valley. So some of the things we learned from the focus groups were people in their minds actually seem to organize their lives like a calendar. Like, when they think about, like, what am I doing? They've been so trained by looking at whether it's, a wall calendar, a desk calendar, your iCal, your GCal, whatever, that they do start thinking about, if you wanted to understand, like, the rhythms of my life, you can look at it if you look like a week view of my calendar and know, like, here's a heat map, here are the things. And when we talked about like, how would you store the information on what's coming up, share it with the right people, enjoy those moments together, and then look back on those moments after they happen with the people you want to see it. They all basically said, like, if you could just take a calendar, make it look sort of fun and pretty, not like dry like iCal or GCal does, but make it look somewhat fun and visual, and just something like touch things. And inside everything, like, it sort of accordions open and becomes like a shared experience, almost like a drawer that I open that has all my friends in there talking about that thing. And it's maybe a little more private if I want it to be, because everyone's like sort of creeped out with like not knowing who's sort of social networking on Facebook and some of these other apps, and make it visual and simple. And those are sort of our guiding philosophies going into this. And we spent a year designing it, building it, and then beta testing it in this fall, winter. So what some of you guys downloaded is Pinata. 2 weeks ago, there's a drummer for this band, Falling in Reverse, who had seen some of our beta users use it at a party where we're just having people like break it for us. And you guys know how beta works? How many beta? Should I explain that? Okay, so in the evolution of building this product, when you get something like working, which in our case was, we'll be able to show you like flyers, and every flyer you could touch, open it up, and inside there's like a little blog that you and your friends can contribute to, photos or text, and write to each other. Then close it, put it back, and look at other flyers for that day. You can go to other days, just like a calendar. Imagine it's literally like a calendar, just a window into your calendar you can move around, right? So the very first working version of that, it's kind of alpha. It's buggy, it breaks. It's almost like a proof of concept you can just show to investors, go like, imagine something like this that didn't crash, give us some money, we'll stop it from crashing. That was kind of my pitch. So that's like your alpha. And then beta is where you say, it kind of works now to the point where I need people to tell me like where we were right and where we were just wrong. Like where we designed things that people are like, give me more of that. And where we designed things that maybe actually not that important. Like sometimes you talk about stuff, especially in focus groups, that when you see it implemented, you're like, it's not as cool as I thought it was. But this other thing, it's really simple, is kind of cool. So we spent basically like October, November, December in beta, where we just gave it to friends, Dave, Kishan, and said, hey, we know it's kind of broken. We're totally good. Like, you should tell us now that our baby has big ears before we release it, because it would be nicer to hear it from a friend, like, you should deal with your baby's ears, So we did this, and it was fun seeing like who responded to this, because a lot of the people that got into it were artists. It didn't spread a lot peer-to-peer. People were still like, well, I can't invite my friends yet because we're in beta, so it's not really fun to use like an app, a social network app, if I'm the only one who has it. But here are my thoughts on it this way. But the ones who really got into it were musicians, street artists, models, photographers. They were like, oh my God, I love this storytelling format. I can't exactly do this on Instagram. Yeah, obviously most of them don't use Facebook anymore. They're like, I can't do this quite on Pinterest. Twitter's more of an information network for me. Like, this is interesting. So what I mentioned right when I sat down, I'm going to wrap up with this, is in a weird way in which life works, there's this guy, Ryan Seaman, who knew one of my guys was at a party with him and said, I'm going on tour next week. Can I play with that? And he came, Duff's, our guy, came back to me and said, like, what do you think about this? And I figured, he's a musician. He's probably going to flake out. He's probably actually going to do it. Sure, what the hell? Give him a code. He can have his own code, and let him play with it. He went on Instagram 2 weeks ago, took a snap, or like a screenshot of our logo, and posted it on his Instagram feed. He's Falling in Reverse is about at the 1.5 million Facebook fan level, 140,000 Twitter followers. And Ryan himself has about 39,000, 40,000 Instagram followers, right? He's the drummer, not the lead singer. So he posted on Instagram our logo. Underneath it wrote, hey man, follow my tour diary. I'm going to post photos on here. You can use my secret code. And literally posted his like secret code on his Instagram. And he got like 1,700 likes in like a day or two. And we're like, oh, it's kind of cool, huh? We started getting almost 200 signups a day the past like 10 days. There were like 2,000 some odd people in the app. We were not technically in release for. We hadn't really like, battened down the hatches and all that, because we thought, oh, we'll wait a little bit. We'll get like a bunch of our band friends together, a bunch of street artists together, a bunch of our model friends. and do that. So right now, I mean, the meeting I just came from and where I'm going right after this is basically now going to, I was at Universal Music yesterday, going to Warner's tomorrow, and saying like, hey, we built this tool to tell stories. And it seems to be working for this guy. Anyone you have that is interested in this, like, please show it to him. This is what we built. And it's free. There's no advertising. Someday there'll be advertising, I'm sure. But at this point, it was just like, here's something we believe in. And we think it actually is a more emotional way to engage with your fans. Your fans can post photos. Like, if you go in there, you can find Ryan Seaman, anyone who downloaded it. Like, just look on your wall. I set it up tonight so that you'll be auto-subscribed to a couple of things. You can take Ryan Seaman's blog, essentially. You'll see we made one for tonight. I think there are maybe a couple models or a couple street artists and stuff that are in there. So you can kind of like get a sample as if you know these people. And we just said, play with it. Talk to your fans. Let your fans talk to you. Let us know how it works. And that is, that's the story of my life. There you go.
Describe how many people are in your apartment.
Yes. Okay. So when I started Centropolis, it was really easy because we'd just done Independence Day to get a check for $15 million. Like literally walk into a meeting and go, we're going to need like $15 million to do this. Check arrives, right? Starting this one, very different experience. No one believed we were actually going to build this. There was no one on my team that had ever built a massively consumer-facing mobile application, right? A lot of people had individual experiences doing this, marketing this, building this thing. But there was no one there that was like, hey man, I built Snapchat, or hey man, I built this. And there are obviously not a ton of these, which is why it's hard to say. So we started out where it was literally my partner and I in my condo here in West Hollywood, and then my assistant from Fox came over and joined us. And then there was a Photoshop artist that was at a party, thought we were doing this cool. He's like, I'll come over and work on that for a couple of days. Then there's like another Photoshop artist. Then there are like 7 to 10 people who basically work out of my condo 5-6 days a week. And it's very startup. I mean, some days I come back from a meeting and my place looks like a scene of The Social Network, where it's just like my entire kitchen counter, my dining room table, my living room, and then in my place, the third bedroom, I just cover with pillows. It's like our brainstorm room, so it's just like 150 pillows in an empty bedroom, all just like little MacBooks out glowing and like people tapping away. And it's I never thought my life would be like this. Like 2 years ago, like didn't envision this.
So 9 people in your apartment. Nothing like coming home after a long day to see people at your house. Hold your questions, and then we'll get 10 minutes at the end. But let's thank Stephen right now.